بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلوات وتم التسليمات على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله الهاشمي القرشي وعلى آله وأصحابه beginning our next third of Ramadan that has been described in some of the akhbar as the period of maghfirah, and the first third as the period of rahmah, of mercy, the second third as وله رحمة وأوسطه مغفرة وآخره عتق من النار, and the last third to be emancipation from the hellfire. فنسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يرحمنا ويغفر لنا ويجعلنا من عتقاء هذا الشهر الكريم بمنه وفضله وغفرانه وإنه ولي ذلك القادر عليه. So we're looking at, in this session, some of the verses from the 10th juz of the Quran, and we are going to look at, inshallah, from Surah At-Tawbah, or Repentance, which is the 9th surah, the 9th chapter of the Quran, and ayah, beginning with ayah number 38, and the قوله تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا ما لكم إذا قيل لكم انفروا في سبيل الله اثاقلتم إلى الأرض أرضيتم بالحياة الدنيا من الآخرة فما متاع الحياة الدنيا في الآخرة إلا قليل إلا تنفروا يعذبكم عذابا أليما ويستبدل قوما غيركم ولا تضروه شيئا والله على كل شيء قدير. So this surah is also referred to as Surah Bara'ah, because it begins with قوله تعالى براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الناس يوم الحج الأكبر أن من المشركين فسيحوا في الأرض 4 أشهر إلى آخر الآيات. So Bara'ah, or to declare innocence from the af'al, from the acts of the mushrikeen. And in this surah we do see some of the ahkam, some of the rulings pertaining specifically within the martial tradition within Islam, and that's something that is there. The Prophet ﷺ did wage campaigns against his adversaries who came to attack him, either came to attack Medina or were planning to attack Medina or attack the religion of the Prophet ﷺ, the deen of Islam. And so this was not something that was happening in the Meccan period. The Prophet ﷺ would often say to the Sahaba, yani, sabrun, patience, forbearance. When the mother of Ammar ibn Yasir was martyred by the Quraysh, he told them, sabrun ala Yasir, inna maw'idukum al-jannah. Patience, the family of Al Yasir, your meeting will be in paradise. Your abode will be in paradise. And then there was no general permission for really any sort of self-defense in an organized way until the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Al-Medina. أذن للذين يقاتلون في سبيل الله بأنهم ظلموا وإن الله على نصرهم لقدير. Surah Al-Hajj, that was revealed in Al-Medina. And so أذن للذين, so it has been given permission. Allah has given permission to those who have been transgressed against, who have been wronged, to fight or to defend themselves. فمن اعتدى عليكم فاعتدوا عليه بمثل ما اعتدى عليكم. And those who have violated you or transgressed against you, then it is permitted for you to respond in kind. But we still see the general Quranic injunction, وَأَن تَعْفُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى, وَأن تَعْفُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى, and to have afu, to be clement and to be forgiving, is closer to taqwa. But this general admonition is more specific to incidents of sort of personal injury or perceived slights, things like this. But when the very fabric of the community, the society, is being threatened, then that's not an appropriate time to show forgiveness, because you can lose that which is most precious to you, which is the very lifestyle and the practice of the deen and uh, the legitimacy of your community. So in this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed that there should be a spirited defense when this happens. And this has been kind of sunnah ilahiyah, that people are to defend themselves when they are being threatened, especially if they are being threatened in an existential way. And so the Quraysh, what they wanted really is no more Islam and no more Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And they tried to do this in a myriad of ways in the beginning. When the Prophet ﷺ was still in Mecca, they tried to goad him, they tried to bribe him, they tried to exert pressure on him from the other tribes. They boycotted him, an economic boycott that lasted a number of years. They put pressure on his uncle. They threatened the people that were his companions. They assaulted them. As we said, even one of them was murdered and martyred fi sabilillah. They attempted to assassinate him on more than one occasion. And so we see that there was many attempts, and then they mounted armies against him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the companions, when they began and they formed a community in Medina. So there was the battles of Badr and the battle of Uhud, and then others later on, like Hunayn and so forth. So and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took the bay'ah on several occasions, the bay'ah being the oath of fealty, that not just to obey the Prophet ﷺ, but to defend with one's life and to defend one's honor, and be willing to put up one's life to do that. And as we mentioned before, in the Medinian society, we had a new group of people who espoused or expressed Islam outwardly, but inwardly they were not believers, referred to as the munafiqeen, or as the hypocrites. So one of the campaigns that the Prophet ﷺ was going to mount was the campaign towards Tabuk, which was up towards what they called Ard al-Rum, or close to probably northern Jordan, what would be considered to be the beginning of the Byzantine border. And this battle it never happened, actually. It was ended in sulh, ended in a sort of understanding and treaty, but that was the intention, due to perceived threats from that area. And so the time that they were going to go was very close to harvest season. So the Ansar, their livelihoods were from the date plantations, and harvest comes late summer. So kind of like late August, mid to late August, early September, which is probably the hottest, or one of the hottest times of the year in Medina and in the Arabian Peninsula in general. So it was under that context that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala issues this sort of rebuke or admonition that we'll see in the following verses. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, ma lakum idha qila lakum infiru fi sabilillahi thaqaltum ila al-ard, araditum bil hayati ad-dunya min al-akhirah. Believers, why is it said to you, go and fight in God's cause? Do you feel weighted down to the ground? Do you prefer this world to the life to come? Right? أَرَضِيتُمْ بِالْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا مِنَ الْآخِرَةِ. How small the enjoyment of this world is compared with the life to come. فَمَا مَتَاعُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا فِي الْآخِرَةِ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ إِلَّا تَنْفِرُوا يُعَذِّبْكُمْ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا. If you do not go out and fight, God will punish you severely and put others in your place, but you cannot harm him in any way. God has power over all things. يُعَذِّبْكُمْ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا وَيَسْتَبْدِلْ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ وَلَا تَضُرُّهُ شَيْئًا وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. So a strong admonition from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to some of the Sahaba, and more likely it's directly addressing the munafiqeen, or those who takasaru, those who didn't want to go. And we'll see later on from these verses that they had several excuses not to go. So illa tanfiru, so this nafir means to march, to go, to aid the Prophet ﷺ. يُعَذِّبْكُمْ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا. Right? So this type of adhab, or this severe punishment, both in this life and in the next life. So because it's not just about denying Allah's command, this is also failure to live up to their commitment to our Prophet ﷺ. So this is our Prophet ﷺ amongst them, and they refused or were making excuses not to go. وَيَسْتَبْدِلْ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ. Right? And then the end of the verse is reminding us, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can replace you. Those who will follow the Prophet ﷺ, who will be obedient to him and will support him, have his back. وَلَا تَضُرُّهُ شَيْئًا. Right? And what you do is not going to really hurt the Prophet ﷺ. So the pronoun, it means تضره, يعني Nabi ﷺ, or تضر الدين, al-Islam. So you will not hurt the deen, nor you will hurt the Prophet ﷺ. You will not bring harm to it by your refusal to go, but in actuality you are hurting yourself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised the Prophet ﷺ that he would give him the nasr, that he would give him the aid, he would give him the victory. And so the Prophet ﷺ was assured of this and didn't have any doubts about it. So then this verse is actually addressing those people who refuse to go, that it will be something that will fall back on you. Al-wabal sayakunu alaykum antum la ala nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That the damage that will be done will be to yourselves. And you cannot hurt or damage the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken upon himself to give him aid, to give him victory. So Imam Ibn Ajib, he says an ishara in this verse in general that we can take to heart, especially the ta'bir ثَاقَلْتُمْ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ مِنَ الثِّقَلِ, right? Which means literally it means have you been drawn heavy to the earth, right? You don't want to get up, you don't want to move. So there's like a meaning of kasal, of laziness, or of lack of desire to sacrifice. And Imam Ibn Ajib said this ruh, he didn't say ruh al-tadahi, that's my ta'bir, but this spirit of sacrifice is something that the believer should have at their disposal. This is talking about al-jihad al-asghar, right? So in one of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, Udna, and I believe it might have been from Tabuk. I don't remember which ghazwa he's talking about, but it might have been that. Udna min al-jihad al-asghar ila al-jihad al-akbar. We have returned from the lesser jihad, and now we're coming to the greater jihad, yani jihad al-nufus. So the jihad of overcoming our egos, the struggle with our egos. And so this takasul or thiqal, this heaviness, needs to be countered by a spirit of ready to sacrifice and ready to take on a much more potent and permanent enemy than the Byzantines to the north, or the Quraysh in Mecca, but rather our nufus, our egos. And so there has to be a willingness to take it on. And the door to overcoming that ego is our Prophet ﷺ. He is our wasila, he was our means to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you do not take on this jihad nufusikum, the jihad of your nafs, يعذبكم عذابا أليما بغم الحجاب وشدة التعب والنصب وتوارد الخواطر والهموم. This is Ibn Ajiba. He said, so if you don't do this, then you will be faced with the darkness or the misery, let's say, غم الحجاب, the misery of being veiled from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So al-bu'd, to be distant, not to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is a true type of adhab. And some even said that adhab al-akhirah, the chastisement of the next life, in reality it's going to be because of the bu'd. So the ta'adhib al-arwah wa ta'adhib al-abdan, or ta'adhib al-ashbah wa ta'adhib al-arwah. So the chastisement of bodies, yes, bin niran, with the fire, but your soul will suffer greater chastisement with this inqita', this bu'd, this distance, and being isolated and alienated from the one who created you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you don't have a willingness to go forth and struggle and strive for your own sake, then you might find the ghamm al-hijab, you might find the misery of being blocked from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa shiddat al-ta'ab wal-nasb, and weariness and tiredness and exhaustion, wa tawarud al-khawatir wal-humum, right? And you will have continuous, uneasy and anxious thoughts and worries. وَتَرَادُفُ الْأَكْدَارِ وَالْغُمُومِ, right? and difficulties and miseries will come your way. And when when we're far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we find ourselves in a feeling of harmful separation, al-farq, that we're not combined, our hearts are not joined towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a lonely place, it's an alienating place, and it's a very unsure and uncertain place to be, that particular space when you feel that you're far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is ultimately what causes human beings to be anxious and worried, and it also opens up the door for wasawis, for misgivings and unsurety about your wudu, and about are you doing the right things in life, and every act that you do, you tend to question it. It's all because we're not in a good place with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So mujahadat al-nafs, to counter the ego with a program of mujahada by following the sunnah, by denying it its whims and its caprice, and by keeping it at bay and allowing the better part of us to be in charge, our spirit and our qalb, our piercing inside of our hearts, then that will put us in a place, inshallah, we won't have this tathaqul. إِثَّاقَلْتُمْ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ أَرَضِيتُمْ بِالْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا مِنَ الْآخِرَةِ. Have you been more pleased with the life, dunya life, in other words, taking your pleasures and so forth, than the akhirah, and that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared for you of the akhirah, that you also find its bawadir, you will find foreshadowing of it in this life, Jannat al-Ma'arif, so the Jannah of knowledge, the Jannah of proximity, the Jannah of qurb to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you will see that in greater degrees in the next life. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا تَنْصُرُوهُ فَقَدْ نَصَرَهُ اللَّهُ إِذْ أَخْرَجَهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا ثَانِيَ اثْنَيْنِ إِذْ هُمَا فِي الْغَارِ إِذْ يَقُولُ لِصَاحِبِهِ لَا تَحْزَنْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا فأنزل الله سكينته عليه وأيده بجنود لم تروها وجعل كلمة الذين كفروا السفلى وكلمة الله هي العليا والله عزيز حكيم. So ayah 40, even if you do not help the Prophet, God helped him when the disbelievers drove him out. When the two of them were in the cave, he, yani Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said to his companion, "Do not worry, God is with us." And God sent his calm down to him, aided him with forces invisible to you, and brought down the disbelievers' plan. God's plan is higher. God is almighty and wise. So this is referring to, as you might have figured out, when the Prophet ﷺ made the hijrah from Mecca to Al-Medina, and he was the last person to leave, or second to last before Sayyidina Ali, who was left behind to take care of some of his affairs, and also as a ruse, as they went to the house of the Prophet ﷺ, and they found that Sayyidina Ali was sleeping in his bed and not the Prophet himself. And so in addition to that, the Prophet ﷺ also tried to throw them off the trail by spending 3 days and 3 nights in Ghar Thawr, a mountain pass close to Mecca, to the east of Mecca, and in order to throw them off the trail, so not on the way towards Al-Medina. And he had the children of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, so Asma, who is referred to as that in Nataqain, because she would tie the two ends of her garment together, the two knots. She would go back and forth and see the akhbar, listen to what Quraysh was doing, and then report back to the Prophet ﷺ, and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who was the other person with him. He was Thani Ithnain. So not mentioned by name in the verse, but by sifa, by attribute. So this is referring to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. The only companion mentioned specifically by name in the Quran was Zayd ibn Haritha, who was formerly Zayd ibn Muhammad, the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ, but then after the tabanni, the adoption was prohibited, he became Zayd ibn Haritha. فَلَمَّا قَضَى مِنْهَا زَيْدٌ وَطَرًا زَوَّجْنَاكَهَا, referring to Zainab bint Jahsh, who was the former wife of Zayd, and then she became the wife of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But anyway, here it's referring specifically to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, ثاني اثنين إذ هما في الغار. And so also the Abdullah ibn Abu Bakr would go back and forth with a flock of sheep to cover their trail. So despite all of these things, somehow Quraysh nevertheless was able to pick up their trail, and they came to the mouth of the cave. And this is when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq said to the Prophet ﷺ, all they have to do is look down, because their cave was down here and they're up here, and they will see us. And this is when the Prophet ﷺ said to him, مَا بَالُكَ اثْنَيْنِ ثَالِثُهُمَا اللَّهُ. What do you think about two, and then the third one amongst them is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or he's also said, لَا تَحْزَنْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا. Don't grieve, don't worry, Allah is with us. فأنزل الله سكينته عليه وأيده بجنود لم تروها. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down His sakina, the serenity, the tranquility, وأيده بجنود لم تروها. And He aided him with junud, with forces invisible to you. So it's also been said that at that point when Quraysh was coming close, that a pigeon, two pigeons came and they had a nest and they laid their eggs right there. And also a spider spun its web over the mouth of the cave. And so when the Quraysh looked at it, it looks like no one has been there they didn't bother to look inside, because they said this has been undisturbed, and this spider web and this pigeon's nest would have been disturbed if someone had went in. And so they left. So this is the junud, could be referring to the junud. Lam tarawha. Also, we know that in Ghazwat Badr and Ghazwat Uhud, al-malaika, the angels also were there on the battlefield. Even the Sahaba described how we saw people of the enemy in Badr, and they were being cut down, and we don't see who's actually doing it, but it was the angels who were also amongst the Sahaba. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, سينصر هذا الدين لا محالة. He will give victory to this deen, He will give victory to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so for the Sahaba, it's not really a scolding to say, how could you let this happen to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to let anything happen to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But it's really a scolding to them, like, how can you do this to yourselves? How can you allow this to yourselves? إِلَّا تَنْصُرُوهُ فَقَدْ نَصَرَهُ اللَّهُ إِذْ أَخْرَجَهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Right? And Allah aided him when the disbelievers أخرجوا, they forced him to leave or drove him out, it says here, when the two of them were in the cave, namely Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and the Prophet ﷺ. And then he says, لِصَاحِبِهِ, right, to his companion, لَا تَحْزَنْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا. And also, there's a subtle, I would say, those who disparage the Sahaba and try to say that they somehow they betrayed the Prophet ﷺ or betrayed the family of the Prophet ﷺ. هذا يعني قول عظيم, because right here it says about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq لصاحبه, to his companion, and no one of any repute is going to say anyone but Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was in the cave with the Prophet ﷺ. There's no evidence to the contrary whatsoever. It's شيء يعني مقطوع به, that it was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. There were certain, and the Quran is referring to him صاحبه, يعني the friend, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ. لا تحزن إن الله معنا. Do not grieve or do not worry, Allah is with us. فأنزل الله سكينته عليه وأيده بجنود لم تروها. And He aided him with forces invisible to you. وجعل كلمة الذين كفروا السفلى. And brought down the disbelievers' plan. And I don't see how he translates here, but كلمة الذين كفروا السفلى وكلمة الله هي العليا. So the word of the disbelievers became the sufla, became the lower one, and the word of God, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, هي العليا. And how did that happen? Because the Prophet ﷺ eventually was given victory. He left Mecca, he made it to Medina. 10 years later, he was able to come back to Mecca and liberated from the Quraysh, from the disbelievers, and then it became part of the polity and the community of Muslims, and so kalimatullahi hiya al-ulya. So the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hiya al-ulya, it is the higher one, it is the supreme one. وَكَلِمَةِ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا السُّفْلَى. And the one who disbelieves, then their word is diminished or is less. So the ishara that Sheikh Ibn Ajiba mentions here, he says that just like this is true of the Prophet ﷺ, this is also true of the heirs of the Prophet ﷺ, warathat al-anbiya. So these are, he refers to them as the shuyukh, or the scholars, or shuyukh al-tarbiyah, or the scholars who inculcate adab and spiritual purification in their students. They have this sohbah, right? فَلَا تَحْزَنْ وَأَنْتَ مَعَهُمْ. Right? And another verse that comes later in Surah At-Tawbah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ. Oh, you believe, have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and be with as-sadiqeen, with those who are sadiq, those who have sidq, those who have the utmost forms of sincerity, وَهُوَ الصِّدْق and ikhlas, be with them. And so for our iman and for the viability and sustainability of our iman, it is actually quite necessary to be in an environment, in a space where others are doing the same, where others have yaqeen. There's nothing that can really help to treat an uncertain heart, a heart that has trepidation, that is anxious about its iman and about its life and uncertainties, except to be with someone who has iqan, someone who is in a state of certainty. Just being in the proximity of such a person, just being in their presence, without even words being exchanged, can do much for people's hal, for people's state, to be around people who have these level of iman, this level of certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and level of certainty in Allah's promise. So لا تحزن وأنت معهم, right? Don't grieve, don't worry, and you are with them. And ultimately, لا تحزن وأنت مع الله. Don't grieve and worry when Allah is with you. If you are with Allah, Allah is with you. من كان مع الله فالله معه. If you are with Allah and you are living the certainty of a person who knows that Allah is with them, then know that Allah is with you. ثم قال عز وجل انفروا خفافا وثقالا وجاهدوا بأموالكم وأنفسكم في سبيل الله ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون لو كان عرضا قريبا وسفرا قاصرا لاتبعوك ولكن بعدت عليهم الشقة وسيحلفون بالله لو استطعنا لخرجنا معكم يهلكون أنفسهم والله يعلم إنهم لكاذبون. So go out, no matter whether you are lightly or heavily armed, and struggle in God's way with your possessions and your persons. This is better for you if you only knew. They would have certainly followed you, the Prophet, if the benefit was within sight and the journey short. But the distance seemed too great for them. They would swear by God, if we could, we certainly would go out with you, but they ruined themselves, for God knows that they are lying. انفروا خفافا وثقالا. خفاف, light, وثقالا, heavy. And this has a variety of interpretations. So here the translator, he translates as light-armed and heavy-armed. Some of them said al-aqrab, that which is closer and more of a general meaning, في المنشط والمقرة. So خفافا يعني في المنشط. You are light, it's easy for you to go, you are enthusiastic about going, about doing it. Or ثقالا, right? From the other verse, أثاقلتم إلى الأرض, the same word, ثقالا, this heaviness. Or you are heavy, it's difficult for you to go, you're not so enthusiastic, then do it anyway. وَجَاهِدُوا بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ وَأَنفُسِكُمْ, right? And by your amwal and your anfus, with both that which you possess from wealth and your own souls, فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. This is better for you if you only knew. And again, the ishara, as we said, is that this is general admonition for everybody. So when you are establishing your heart in this life then use that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put as your means. And another verse that comes also later in Surah At-Tawbah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ وَأَنفُسَهُمْ بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةِ يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِهِ وَيُقْتَلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has purchased the believers, both their wealth and their persons, their souls, بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةِ, and they will get in return paradise. And they said this is a very unique type of trade-off, because both your soul and your possessions already belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you're not really giving anything up. It's just the conception that you're giving something up, but you're not really, because they belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to begin with. And nevertheless, He will trade with you and give you paradise if you submit to His will and you strive and struggle for His way. And so that means even this amwalikum, your wealth, right? This is like figuratively it's yours, because in actuality it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this is like sharaf and nisbah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it's yours so that you may have the reward of saying, I struggled with my money. Wa anfusikum, right? And your souls really, al-anfus lillah, they really belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, what we call sharaf and nisbah, this honorable affiliation, so that you may come on the day of judgment and you said, I spent of that which Allah gave me, both of my wealth and both of my soul. I gave both of them away for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And khifafan wa thiqala, whether it was easy for me to do and I was enthusiastic, or whether it was more difficult for me to do. ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. It's better for you if you actually knew. لو كان عرضا قريبا وسفرا قاصرا لاتبعوك. So going back to this Ghazwat Tabuk, they would have certainly followed you if the benefit was within sight. عرضا قريبا, right? They were going to get some war booty out of it, or it's going to be an easy battle, or there's a big caravan. وسفرا قاصدا, and the easy journey. But it was a long journey and it was marching in the heat. لاتبعوك, although they would have followed you. ولكن بعدت عليهم الشقة, but the distance was too great for them. The shuqqah, the hardship was too great. وسيحلفون بالله لو استطعنا لخرجنا معكم, and they will swear to you that if we could, we have went with you. يهلكون أنفسهم والله يعلم إنهم لكاذبون. They will say that, but they ruin themselves, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that they are not being truthful, لكاذبون, that they are lying. And then the next verse, so that's what was the reaction of the Prophet ﷺ. عفى الله عنك لما أذنت لهم حتى يتبين لك الذين صدقوا وتعلم الكاذبين لا يستأذنونك الذين يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر أن يجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم والله عليم بالمتقين إنما يستأذنك الذين لا يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر وارتابت قلوبهم فهم في ريبهم يترددون. So ayah 43, God forgive you. عفى الله عنك. May Allah forgive you. God forgive you, Prophet. Why did you give them permission to stay at home before it had become clear to you which of them spoke the truth and which were liars? Those who have faith in God and the last day do not ask you for exemption from struggle with their possessions and their persons. God knows exactly who is mindful of Him. Only those who do not have faith in God, in Allah, and the last day ask your permission to stay home. They have doubts in their heart, and so they waver. Afallahu ank. So see even how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Afallahu ank. May Allah give you clemency and pardon you. And we said earlier in some of the earlier sessions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can speak to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a way, and the other prophets, that no one else can speak to them. This is the khitab, the address between Allah and His prophets. And so He has every haqq, every right to speak in this manner with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's more like a sort of slight ta'deeb. And the Prophet ﷺ, he himself said, أَدَّبَنِي رَبِّي, or وَرَدَ كَذَلِكَ أَدَّبَنِي رَبِّي فَأَحْسَنَ تَأْدِيبِي, that my Lord has inculcated with me proper etiquette with Him in the mu'amala, in the dealings with Allah, and He is the best of those who inculcate adab, etiquette in the prophets and in the messengers and in people in general. So, عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْكَ لِمَا أَذِنْتَ لَهُمْ. Why did you give them the permission? حتى يتبين لك الذين صدقوا وتعلم الكاذبين, until it became clear to you the ones who were truthful from the ones who were not, the ones who were lying. And then the next verses say, well, how would we know that? He said, لا يستأذنك الذين يؤمنون باليوم الآخر أن يجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم. Those who truly want to strive in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not seek an exemption. And coming later in also Surah At-Tawbah, at the end of the 10th juz, at the beginning of the 11th juz, there were people who came to the Prophet ﷺ who did not have the uddah. They didn't have the material. So they didn't have a horse, they didn't have a sword, they didn't have anything. They couldn't prepare themselves. They were fuqara. They were not of the means to do so. But they still wanted to participate. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to them, لا أجد ما أحملكم عليه. I don't have that which I can carry. And then تولوا وأعينهم تفيض من الحزن حزنا ألا يجدوا ما ينفقون. And then they turned away and they were weeping because they wanted to go, but they were weeping because they did not have that which would to spend so that they can go. That would be the believer. So they would not seek an exemption not to go, they would seek an exemption to go. لا يستأذنك الذين يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر أن يجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم والله عليم بالمتقين, and Allah knows who the muttaqin are. إنما يستأذنك الذين لا يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر. The ones who seek an exemption are the ones who don't believe in Allah and in the last day. وارتابت قلوبهم, and they have doubt in their hearts. فهم في ريبهم يترددون, so they are wavering in their doubt, in their self-doubt, and they don't want to go. And so the beauty of the Prophet ﷺ, the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, is that even those who came to him and said, oh, I have a harvest and no one's going to be around, and if I had my own horse and camel, I would go, but I can't. So they made like these type of excuses not to go. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't rebuke them. He didn't reject that, and he let them go. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Afa Allahu ank, Ya Rasulullah. Maybe perhaps you know that these people are not truthful, but it is out of your mercy, right? It is out of your kindness of character and your gentleness that you gave them this permission. But in this mountain, in this particular situation, you should have waited to see the ones who are truthful from the ones who are not. So Allah Ta'ala a'la wa a'lam, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. So we'll stop here, bi'idhnillah. جزاكم الله خير, بارك الله فيكم, رمضانكم مبارك. أفاض عليكم الله سبحانه وتعالى من أنواره وبركاته ونفحاته, وتقبل منا ومنكم صيامنا وقيامنا وسجودنا وسحورنا ودعائنا, ونسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يفرج عن هذه الأمة وأن يخرجها من هذا الضيق إلى السعة, إلى رحمة الله, وأن يخرج من دائرة سخطه إلى دائرة رضاه بإذنه ومنه تعالى, والحمد لله رب العالمين.